This video is an extract from the 12-lesson Moodle plugin development by example course. Until the end of September 2023, you can get a free ebook copy of the Introduction to Moodle 3.9 Plus plugin development book by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Follow the link to subscribe and to claim your copy. So let's start our lesson by looking at the Moodle development guidelines. Now, there's no obligation to use the development guidelines, but it's definitely good practice to do so, particularly if your intention is to release your plugin to the plugins directory. So there's two links here in this page to the useful documentation on the Moodle website. And we will look at this a little later on in this lesson. There are two tools. One that I've spoken about these tools in lesson 1, the code checker and PHP doc checker that help you follow the guidelines with your code. A hint is to install and add the folders to the gitignore file, so you just keep it in your development environment. It really depends on how you manage your Git repository. So before we dive in, I need to talk about Frankenstyle. Not Frankenstein the monster, but Frankenstyle, which is the name given to the naming convention that is used throughout Moodle. And when I say it's used throughout Moodle, it is basically just about everywhere in Moodle. And the naming conventions are important if you want your plugin to fit in properly with the Moodle framework. So the format of it is kind of simple. So for example, a repository plugin called Google Drive will have the Frankenstyle name of repository _ Google Drive and will be installed in the repository Google Drive folder. And there's a link there to look at Frankenstyle in more detail, but we will be using this throughout the course and you'll soon get quite used to it. So it's basically type of plugin plus the name of your plugin separated by an underscore. Coding styles. So we'll just browse through this for a few minutes to touch on some interesting bits. So down here we've got the overview. So it describes style guidelines for people working with Moodle code. You've got to remember sometimes this documentation is more aimed at core developers than it is at plugin developers, but we're trying to follow the development guidelines as much as we possibly can. Okay. Right, so the goals is a consistent coding style, obviously, and the abstract goals is simplicity. That's one thing that is really clear when you look at Moodle code. They really like the idea of things being simple rather than clever. Readability, so it's easy to look at and things like that. Okay, so here we have the recommendation to use those two tools that we've just looked at. Okay, so then we look at the different areas. So we've got file formatting, as in PHP tags always full, right? Indentation, for spaces instead of tabs, and you don't indent your first level. So don't indent the main script level. So that's one of the things. Maximum line length, 132 characters, but if really push 180 characters. The exception is your language files, because you may have some long strings to define. Okay, so wrapping lines, definitions of how you wrap lines. Look at that, an extra indentation there for something that's carrying on. Wrapping if statements, wrapping class declarations, wrapping function signatures, wrapping parameters for function calls, wrapping arrays, and then line termination. So line termination, Unix line feed, nothing else. No white space characters at the end of the line. A lot of IDEs, if you set them up, will take the trailing blanks off. No extra blank lines at the end of the file. So every file should just end with a single line feed character. So file names, again, remember a lot of this is covered by your Frankenstyle names anyway, but lower cases, short as possible, be whole English names to make it easy for somebody to find those files or know what a file is. And then again, class names, functions and method names, function parameters, variables, the constants, how you define constants, Frankenstyle prefix with the plugin name, see, that kind of stuff. Booleans and the null value always in lowercase. Namespaces, stuff about namespaces. And we go down there. They give you lots of examples, so you really get a good sense of what is good and what is bad. So never use the namespace magic constant. Namespace bracketed blocks, don't like that. Okay, so you can see, we'll keep going down in case there's something really catches my eyes. So rules for level 1, rules for level 2, etc. Namespaces. Then you come to strings, how you define your strings. Use single quotes when the string is literal or contains lots of double quotes. So especially in your strings file, and I always go for trying to keep it single quotes. So double quotes, less useful, but as you know, that's when you want to include a variable in your string. So, and then they have SQL queries in double quotes, because you normally will have single quotes around your fields, etc. There's guidelines as to how to actually format SQL statements in your code. You could have a look at that by yourself. So variable substitution, it can be both those forms. Concatenation with the full stop operator, and normally I think now they expect spaces between there. I don't know if this documentation is out of date a little bit, but if I remember rightly, the code checker will pick up if there's no space between the concatenation dot operator. So there you go. Then things like capitals in language strings, so always look like this. So they don't, that capital, what they call capitalized case, is not what is regarded as good practice. So there you go. Okay, or white spaces stuff, arrays, class declarations. Now we're getting into the PHP doc stuff. So the class declarations, functions and methods, control statements, how they defined, switches, for each, ternary operators, and the required include stuff, and more about PHP doc stuff, and the tags. So your types, etc. Short names. So we use short type names rather than full names in tags. So then the tags, we've got copyright, license, param, return, var, and then other stuff that's more elaborate. Users, access, package required, category not always required, since more for the core developers. C, at link, at deprecated, used quite a bit in the core when deprecating plugin code. Throws, if you throwing exceptions, and other specific tags that are for testing, such as this at given, at when, etc. And then the files, file documentation that I've spoken about previously. And it's a long page, but it's worth reading through. A lot of it might make sense, so you probably do it automatically anyway, but there are things that you can probably learn from this. But if you use, like I've said before, if you use the code checker tool, you'll get picked up for certain things, and you'll start to think about them automatically. But there's some dangerous functions: eval, preg replace, backticks, and go to, etc. And then there's a bit about git commits, and I think that's more aimed at the code developers. So some credits there, and then some other coding styles. So you look at the JavaScript coding styles, CSS coding styles, the SQL one that I mentioned earlier, etc. So that's it for the presentation. To watch other extracts from the course, click on the playlist link, or alternatively, watch the video describing the course content. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and thanks for watching.